Back when I was actively volunteering at the museum in St. John's and working on the files in the archives, I came across a paper that listed it was an itemized expense list related to the Spanish influenza from 1919. I thought it was very interesting and wanted to learn more about this pandemic and the effect it had in Apache County, so I began another research adventure. The origin of Spanish influenza is still not clear. Despite its name, this strain most likely started in the United States and then spread to Europe. The first cases of sickness were reported at Fort Riley, Kansas. Over 1,100 soldiers became sick, with 46 actually dying. Later, some of the troops training at Fort Riley deployed to Europe for service in the war, and with them traveled the influenza virus. It spread rapidly, first to the soldiers fighting on both sides of the war, and then to the civilian masses who welcomed them home. Influenza hit Arizona in late September 1918. The disease probably reached Phoenix first, spreading outward to the rest of the state during the end of September. By October 11th, Flagstaff, Winslow, and Holbrook were reporting epidemics. As influenza spread, public health officials were quickly overwhelmed. The epidemic peaked in the state during the first week of November. That week, the state reported deaths from influenza, which were 4 times the state's annual average. City officials and residents reacted to the spread of the disease with alarm. Many Arizonans insisted that the disease was spread by dogs. In Phoenix, as police and city residents killed dogs in an attempt to prevent the spread of influenza, the local paper reported that Phoenix will soon be dogless. Schools, theaters, and other public areas were also closed for 3 months. In both Tucson and Phoenix, police arrested residents who ventured out in public without a gauze mask. Officials believed that the masks prevented the spread of the disease and had required people to wear these to prevent the spread of the disease. When they passed these requirements, city officials and scientific experts were unaware of the fact that influenza is spread by a virus which is small enough to pass through a gauze mask. "Whole city is to be masked this morning," proclaimed a dramatic late November Arizona Republican article. The story warned that those who violated the order by the city's health officer faced fines of up to $100 and/or 30 days in jail. It went on to say that doctors favored the wearing of masks and that citizens rushed to stores for masks and materials to make gauze or cloth face coverings. Phoenix formed a citizens committee to take charge. The Influenza Citizens Committee deputized a special police force and also called upon all patriotic citizens to enforce anti-influenza ordinances, including requiring every person in public to wear a mask, arresting anyone who spit or coughed without covering his mouth, dictating that businesses give 1,200 cubic feet of airspace to each customer, and halting all traffic into the city and allowing only those with actual business here to enter. Our restrictions for the current pandemic echo many of the restrictions that were implemented during the Spanish flu. Masks, social distancing, businesses closed, but even worse, they could be fined or arrested for spitting on the streets, coughing without covering their mouth, and being in public without a mask, as well as the quarantine of entire communities. They also faced shortages of goods. The main one I came across was shortages of Vicks VapoRub. In October of 1918, a shortage of Vicks was declared, and it took until March of 1919 for the company to get caught up on all their back orders of the ointment. A March newspaper article stated that since October of the previous year, 13 million bottles of Vicks had been distributed. Apache County was hit hard, just like other areas of the state and nation. Every newspaper seemed to have an article, advertisement, or death notice pertaining to the Spanish flu. There were some very interesting and scary remedies for the flu shared in the newspapers of the day. Please do not try any of them. Schools were closed, communities quarantined, and the early residents of the county truly suffered during this time. The disease struck the Navajos especially hard. Joseph Schmedding, a trader, entered the Navajo reservation a few weeks after the epidemic had erupted and said that he found 30 Indians, young and old, lying dead in abandoned hogans. In Tuba City, the school was converted into a hospital, and the wife of a Navajo trader wrote, "For miles around, every good winter hogan was deserted because people feared the infection. The living moved out into the rain and found what shelter they could in temporary camps." The economy also suffered. By late October, reports indicated that mining productivity for the state was off as a result of the pandemic. I did learn something new in my research. I had wondered what the difference is between an epidemic and a pandemic, but had just never taken the time to look it up. For those of you who may not know, an epidemic doesn't necessarily have to be contagious, and the rates of the disease are in a specific community or region. A pandemic covers a wide geographical area that covers several countries and populations. It's more of a worldwide issue. After peaking in early November, the disease slowly waned during the late fall and early winter. By the late spring, it had begun to disappear from the state, according to some sources. However, I have found newspaper articles for Apache County from 1920 that still report cases and deaths from this flu. The Spanish flu infected about 1/3 of the Earth's population, and an estimated 50 to 100 million people died from it. But because of its proximity to World War I, its devastation is almost overlooked or forgotten. But no natural disaster, famine, or war has claimed as many lives. Apache County was definitely not spared the ravages of this disease and the heartbreak and loss it caused so many families. Thank you for joining us for this episode, and I hope you learned a little bit something new like I did. If you would like to read more or learn more about the Spanish flu, or at least that time period of history, the library district actually has quite a few books, fiction and nonfiction, that are set during that time period, DVDs and ebooks as well. So we have a lot of resources if you would like to visit your local library and read more about the Spanish flu. Thank you again for joining us, and hope you'll join me again next time for another page from Apache County history.